Yeah.
Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. Despite a late start to the Big Ten season, Ohio State still went 7-1 with a blowout victory over Clemson in the semifinal game before falling to Alabama in the national championship. The Buckeyes once again look like national title contenders, but the major question is, who will be their quarterback? So once again, guys, welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, kicking off our Big Ten predictions today with the Ohio State Buckeyes. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on any future prediction videos from now, again, until the beginning of the college football season. And also make sure to check out all of our offers down in the description below, including our brand new expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. We are offering up both our college football spread picks and our NFL spread picks for the first time ever over on our website. And again, those picks for the last 2 years have been some of the best in the entire country for one of the lowest prices in the entire country. So make sure to go give that a look, because I promise you're not going to regret it. So let's go ahead and take a look at Ohio State. Let's take a look at Ryan Day's Buckeyes. And as we mentioned, this is a team that is a Big Ten title favorite. They are probably the favorite to win the conference again. They are a playoff contender again, but who replaces Justin Fields? That is the million-dollar question. And when you look at the offensive side of the ball, 7 starters are back. So whoever is under center is going to have plenty of talent to work with. It's just a matter of, will it be C.J. Stroud, who we believe it will be, or it could be Jack Miller III, both of which are freshmen, both of which did not throw a pass in 2020. Neither of those two quarterbacks attempted a pass in 2020. So that's the million-dollar question here. Whoever's under center, how well will they fare early on in the year, especially with 2 very tough games to open up the season against Minnesota and Oregon. We'll touch on the second. But the offensive line is very strong. Master Teague is back at running back, put up 514 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. And Ohio State has the best wide receiver core in the country. At least 2 of the top wide receivers in the country, and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, who both combined for over 1,400 reception yards last year and 13 touchdowns. So again, whether it's Stroud or Miller, they're going to have plenty of talent to work with. We're not expecting either of them to be the next Justin Fields, at least not yet. But at least they have the talent around them on offense to keep up the pace and continue to put up the numbers that Ohio State put up in 2020. We take a look at the defense. That's my biggest area of concern for Ohio State. Only 4 starters are back. A team that allowed 304 passing yards per game. That number was the worst in the Big Ten. Ohio State was last in the Big Ten when it came to their passing defense. They were 122nd in the nation when it came to their passing defense. And that concerns me a little bit as they face a lot of decent quarterbacks on their schedule. Another thing you have to look at is their linebacking core. That remains a major concern. Very thin at linebacker. But the Buckeyes only allowed 97.6 rushing yards per game last year. Can they keep that number up? Can they continue to keep it under 100 or just barely over 100? You have Sevyn Banks, Marcus Williamson leading the secondary. But my bigger concern is the front 7. How will that fare for the Buckeyes in 2021? So let's take a look at Ohio State's schedule, guys. What is Ryan Day up against this upcoming season? Well, they opened the year at Minnesota, and the first thing I want to look at Ohio State's schedule is realizing that the schedule is really favorable. It's very favorable for a team that's breaking in a new quarterback and might have a few questions defensively. Because you look, they get Oregon at home. They get Penn State at home. Those are 2 huge games that Ohio State's hosting in Columbus. You could argue that Minnesota is a major trap game. You could obviously argue that Indiana is one of the bigger games on the year, one that could determine the East. Outside of that, Ohio State's set. There's not another game on Ohio State's schedule where they should be underdogs, and they might not be an underdog in any of these games. Those 4 games we mentioned are probably the toughest, and they might not even be that bad for the Buckeyes. So they open the year on a Thursday night, September 2nd, at Minnesota, and as many say, it's a major trap game. Minnesota went just 3-4 last year, but they returned 9 offensive starters, including their star quarterback in Tanner Morgan, their star running back, Muhammad Ibrahim, and then, of course, one of their top wide receivers in Chris Ottman-Bell. Their defense last year, despite the poor record, was 36 in the country against the pass, allowing just 208.7 passing yards per game. And if I'm Ohio State, I'm a little worried about that. Not only are you going into a hostile environment, but you're facing a pretty solid secondary with a brand new quarterback. Yeah, you have some great wide receivers. That's not going to matter if you don't have a quarterback that can get them the ball. So this is a very, very scary game for Ohio State. A very scary one, and we know that PJ Fleck's going to have his team ready to go. But the one downside that I see for Minnesota in this game is the fact that Minnesota allowed 207.1 rushing yards per game last year. Their rushing defense was one of the worst in the country. And I don't know if they're going to have that fixed up in week 1. I also look at Ohio State. They might tend to run the ball a little bit more in this game to give Stroud or Miller a little bit of a break, ease them into the season. I think Master Teague goes off in this game at Minnesota. And while it might be closer than some think, Ohio State does defeat the Golden Gophers in week 1. They then return home to take on Oregon, and this is one of the big marquee matchups of week 2, one of the many marquee matchups that we have in week 2. And unfortunately for Oregon, they were supposed to host the Buckeyes in Eugene last year. Didn't happen. So they're getting the short end of the stick here. They have to come to Columbus. They don't even get the return game right now. But you look at the Oregon team, a team that won the Pac-12 last year, whether you think they should have or not, they still did it, and now have Anthony Brown in at quarterback running Joe Moorhead's offense. And Anthony Brown, I think, a perfect quarterback, the transfer from Boston College, the perfect quarterback to run the RPO-style offense that Moorhead's trying to implement. Not only do they return Brown, they return Travis Dye, C.J. Verdell at running back. They return their top 3 pass catchers, and they are led by one of the best, if not the best, defensive linemen in the country, in Kayvon Thibodeau. Oregon's going to be scary, scary good this year, guys. Scary, scary good. Maybe the Pac-12 favorite. But the one thing that might come back to bite Oregon right now is the fact they lose their defensive coordinator in Andy Avalos, who left to become the head coach at Boise State. They also have to travel to Columbus. And that is the game for me, or the reason for me that we're picking Ohio State. Having home field advantage for one of the biggest games of the year is going to go a long way, especially in a year, as we mentioned, where home field advantage may play a bigger role than we've ever seen before. Whoever is at quarterback for Ohio State will already have a game under their belt in a road environment, a conference road environment. It should prepare them for this game at home against Oregon. And I think Ohio State's defense rises to the occasion, as I think Oregon will be solid on the ground, but I worry about how they'll be through the air with Brown as their passer. So Ohio State gets a win over Oregon, and I'm going to say they win this game by double digits. They beat Tulsa, they beat Akron. We don't have to talk much on either, although Tulsa did have a very solid 2020 season, nearly beating Cincinnati in the American Championship game, but neither are at the caliber of the Buckeyes. So right there, they're 4-0 going into the bulk of Big Ten Conference play to kick off October. They travel to Rutgers on October 2nd. And I'm telling you guys, this Rutgers team is going to surprise some people in 2021. They are going to surprise some people. Whether they get to a bowl game or not still remains to be seen. They might not be there yet, but competitive-wise, they are there. They're going to fight tooth and nail every game regardless of who you are, and Ohio State's no different. This game's in Piscataway, and Rutgers dropped 27 on Ohio State last year. Only lost the Buckeyes 49-27. But right now, the problem for Rutgers is, first off, their defense. And while I do return 8 starters, I don't know if it's going to be enough to stop Ohio State. And second off, it's their offensive consistency. While they return everybody on offense, their quarterback and Noah Vedral, you got Isaiah Pacheco, you got Bo Melton. The talent is there offensively. Sean Gleason's offense has not been fully installed yet, as we saw last year. They're getting much better, but consistency-wise, they're not there yet. They do not have enough to beat Ohio State at home. But I could see them putting up another 27 points or so. Would not be surprised to see that at all. Ohio State then takes on Maryland at home, and we'll chalk that up as a quick win. Maryland's a team that the key word here is should improve. Maryland should improve, but I don't know if they will. Mike Locksley has the talent, and it's not going to be a shock to see Maryland start fast like they had the past few seasons and then fizzle out as the season goes on. Would not be surprised to see that at all. Maryland's defense allowed 230 rushing yards per game last year. Very similar to what we said with Minnesota. I can see this as a game where Master Teague takes over. Where Master Teague in the Ohio State's run game takes over, gives their quarterback a bit of a break. Ohio State at home shouldn't have any issues with the Terrapins. They get their bye week on October 16th, and then they go to Bloomington. They take on Indiana on October 23rd. So they're undefeated, and Indiana very well could be undefeated or just a one-loss team coming into this game. And if that's the case, guys, this game more than likely will determine who wins the Big Ten East. If Indiana lives up to their lofty expectations, if they're undefeated or even just one loss, and it has to be maybe a conference loss, this game determines the East. No doubt about it. If you remember last year, Indiana came into Columbus and almost beat Ohio State. They trailed by, 28 points? And as we mentioned with, P.J. Fleck in Minnesota and Rutgers with Greg Schiano, how they'll fight tooth and nail against every opponent. Tom Allen's team always fights tooth and nail against any opponent. They were down 28 last year, came back, nearly won, just fell 42-35 in the final seconds. Had a chance to tie it at the end of that game. Indiana has 17 starters back. This game in Bloomington will be one of the biggest in Indiana football history if, of course, Indiana has lived up to their expectations by October 23rd. But, like we mentioned with Oregon, Indiana loses their star defensive coordinator in Kane Womack, who left to become the head coach at South Alabama. Indiana did a phenomenal job of creating turnovers last year. They did a phenomenal job of that. I don't expect those numbers to remain the same in 2021, despite returning so much defensive talent. They allowed 241 passing yards per game, and I believe it is going to be C.J. Stroud that's the starter for Ohio State. I believe C.J. Stroud, by this point in the season, is starting to find his groove, and Olave and Wilson have a big enough day in Bloomington to narrowly get by Indiana. The Hoosiers have always been pesky against the Buckeyes. Whether they've been really good or really bad, they always give the Buckeyes a bit of a fight. At home, with this crowd, they're going to give Ohio State everything they can handle. But I just don't think the Hoosiers are there yet. And I don't know if they ever will be. If they want to beat Ohio State, this is the year they have to do it. And I still think they fall just short. Ohio State then gets Penn State at home. Very lucky here. They're lucky they're not getting this game in Happy Valley because they're going to come off a physical game against Indiana. If they had to go to Happy Valley right after that, I might be picking Penn State in an upset. But the game's in Columbus. Ohio State won by 13 last year, 38-25. Now, the one thing I will say about this game, though, is that do not underestimate Penn State. Do not underestimate James Franklin. While they started 0-5 last year, they won 4 straight games to end the year. They also returned 14 starters. They also, despite the poor record, ranked top 30 in the country in rushing defense, passing defense, and total defense. So the talent is there for Penn State, and the Nittany Lions will have a major bounce-back year after a very disappointing 2020. But they will not have enough to come on the road and defeat Ohio. Penn State does not play well in Columbus. We know that. They needed this game in Happy Valley. They had it last year where they really couldn't do a whiteout. They're going to fall short on the road this year, although I could see it being around the same margin. Ohio State then goes into the month of November, and it's a very favorable finish, guys. As we mentioned, the schedule as a whole is very favorable. But look at the finish. At Nebraska, they beat the Cornhuskers 52-17 last year. Do I think there's going to be a major swing this year? Absolutely not. Nebraska is struggling offensively. Their wide receiver core is so thin, which will be a huge break for this Ohio State secondary if they continue to struggle. Adrian Martinez has really yet to find his groove. Scott Frost knows he's in a must-win situation here, a must-win season for him. Just get to the postseason. Come on, it's not that hard. But they're not going to beat Ohio State. They're not going to beat Ohio State despite hosting this game in Lincoln. I just don't think that their offensive consistency, very similar to Rutgers, is there yet for Nebraska. So Ohio State beats the Cornhuskers. They're going to beat Purdue. The Boilermakers don't know who's going to be their quarterbacks. Is it Jack Plummer? Is it Aiden O'Connell? Who's going to throw the ball to David Bell? Because really he's the biggest offensive weapon they have. The Boilermakers allowed 29.8 points per game last year. And until we see some defensive improvement, Purdue's not going to be able to take down some of the Big Ten elite. And again, you can go out and say Ohio State has struggled against West teams before. Those cross-division games like Purdue a few years ago. It's not in West Lafayette. It's in Columbus. Ohio State hosts that game. And while you can say Nebraska is going to be their West scare, Minnesota could be their West scare, we're not too worried about that this year. They round out their season with the 2 Michigan teams. They beat Michigan State 52-12 last year. The Spartans were getting Anthony Russo from Temple, so they might find some quarterback consistency. They might improve their offensive numbers. The Spartans only averaged 18 points per game last year, but their defense allowed over 35 points per game last year. Mel Tucker's squad could go bowling next year, but we're not really seeing any major improvements now in 2021. So Ohio State beats the Spartans, and then they finish the year at the Big House against their rival in the game against Michigan. And we don't even have to give much analysis on that game. And that's so sad when you have one of the better rivalries in all of sports and you don't really want to sit down and talk much about it. And you might ask, why? Well, Ohio State has won 8 straight games against Michigan. Ohio State has defeated the Wolverines 8 straight games. Only 3 of those 8 have been decided by 1 possession. Michigan has only defeated Ohio State 3 times. 3 times since 2000. This has been a lopsided rivalry for 2 decades now. And like we always say, until Michigan can finally beat Ohio State, we can't pick Michigan to beat Ohio State. And while the Wolverines' defense looks solid, it really, again, under Jim Harbaugh, it's going to come down to their offense. So even if they have home field advantage, they've had it in the past with better teams and still haven't been able to take down Ohio State, we're not going to pick for that to happen now. So Ohio State defeats the Wolverines, and just like that, we're predicting a 12-0 record for Ryan Day and the Buckeyes, which will clinch them a spot in the Big Ten Championship, and that means they'll be 1 win away from making another trip to the college football playoff. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, hit that notification button so you don't miss out on any of our prediction videos from now until the beginning of the college football season. Make sure to go sign up for our expert picks over on our website, thegridironexpert.com. The links for that down in the description below. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.